Welcome to the
Yeah.
Dadlit Pod, the literary podcast for people who aren't impressed with your attitude and think you should change it. Today we are talking with Dadlit triple threat, Charlie Kondek. Charlie is a marketing professional and a short story writer from Metro Detroit. He's been a PR man, an ad man, a stringer for weekly newspapers. He's a man of faith, a loving husband, and father of two kids. For many years, he did more PowerPointing, airport drinking, parenting, and husbanding than writing, but he's been working to change that. His work has been featured in Black Cat Weekly, Dark Yonder, Mystery Online, Mystery Tribune, the Saturday Evening Post, and so many other places. In addition, Charlie has a lot of insightful things to say about Dadlit, and I'm thrilled to have him. Charlie, welcome to the Dadlit Pod.
And it is such that what a setup. It is such a pleasure to be here and to be in your company. I
It's
love what you're
it's
doing, and it's great to be here.
well, thank you. I thought so. For those who are just coming to Dadlit, Charlie was actually one of the original Dadlit inspirees from
Mhm.
my Twitter feed where I said, I'm going to have a podcast about Dadlit. And Charlie, you presented what I think is one of the best uh, comments about Dadlit. And I'm just going to read it if you don't mind.
Not at all. That
You
was
you
a
you
good thread.
posted, yeah, you posted the Patricia Lockwood's screed did a
Mhm.
screed against John Updike, and he said, "This is what Dadlit sounds like to me." And so I'm going to quote Patricia Lockwood.
Mhm.
This is not the way his work is ideally read. That would be over the course of a lifetime, accompanied by countless cups of coffee, by a man exactly his own age, and with the same long clowning lines and flared nostrils of a Quentin Blake drawing, smiles and cigarellos in a well defended study, a thatch of white hair. New Updike, he might think, with a little uptick of a tricky heart as he came across a trifling piece in the New Yorker, a meteor story in Playboy, a new novel every few years, all backgrounded by the same infusions of radio and television and newsprint, the same social glosses of life and time.
Isn't that great? Lockwood hates Updike, so she was, I don't think she was being. I don't think she meant to be laudatory in that passage, but doesn't that nail it? New Updike, in his study.
I read that and I said, yeah, that's how I would like to enjoy a book.
Yes.
That sounds
Yeah.
really terrific.
Yeah. Poor Updike. Yeah, I know we were talking about where to take this conversation, and when our two like minds will go easily to all these places, but you've talked a lot of genre lit on the podcast so far. Updike, I think, is a really good example of the dad lit on the literary side. And I love Updike. He's a favorite writer. I'm a short story writer, and as well as being a masterful novelist, Updike was a master of the short story form. And that Lockwood essay is very good, and everything she says is true. Uh, but I can't help feeling like, oh boy, did she just excoriated what's one of my favorite complicated writers.
So
But he's a
what
great example.
would sell me on Updike? What makes Updike good for dads, other
What,
than that he's a man who writes lit? Yeah.
yes, you'll hear me come back to this a lot. Maybe you'll even get sick of it, but for me, prose is the most important aspect of any written work. The other elements, plot, character, setting, theme, meaning, those are important too. Genre, how well it tells the story, and stuff like that. But I'd read the phone book if it was in good prose. I'd read John Updike's grocery list, or you know what I mean. And so it's just that if I were going to sell you on Updike, I'd start with selling you on prose. I'd also start with a great big caveat. There are whole sections of Updike that I don't like. I don't like the rabbit novels. I don't like that character. And something something I struggle with Updike is he's been described as the great mid-century chronicler or post-war chronicler of mundane middle class life, which is I think why he writes so much about sex, because mundane middle class people, one of the things they're deeply mundane middle class men, one of the things they're deeply interested in, especially in the the last century, but it's probably timeless, is sex, right? So I think Lockwood calls him at one point in the essay a malfunctioning sex robot or something like that. Damn, she really lets him have it. And I'm like, I can't argue, but oh boy. But it's that prose, it's that achingly good prose as well, because his subject matter is he's got a wide range, but it's because that subject matter is the mundane and the everyman. He's really able to dig up some insights into. Weren't you talking with another guest about the interiority of a man?
Yes, yes.
I think Updike does that extremely well, and he repeats himself. But like I said, his prose is so good that I don't care if he does repeat himself. He had such a long career. He's able to dig up those insights even if he repeats himself from early fatherhood all the way to old age. His last work, he was still writing in the early and mid 2000s when he passed. And even though he was covering some of the same ground, it was beautiful to watch because I'd seen the same thing as seen him cover the same ground as a younger man. So that's my pitch for Updike. Great prose stylist. Start with short stories, maybe. Avoid the rabbit novels because he can get kind of outrageous. And yeah, it's new Updike.
So you write short stories.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read any of your short stories, unfortunately.
I got to read your stuff
believe it or
too.
not, yes, the challenge I find of doing the podcast is that it takes up more time than I anticipate, but I'm always having fun with it.
Yeah,
So that's it's not a chore. It's just a thing uh that I'm going to have to develop. It's either going to have to be weekly or bi-weekly so that I actually have time to read. And the one thing that I wanted to bring up is that obviously you've written it for the Mystery Tribune,
yeah,
which I've wanted to submit to because it's one of the few remaining uh, sort of crime or literary magazines that's still in print and still on the shelf in
yeah.
the supermarket. So, how many times have you worked with them, and what was your experience, and what'd you write about?
Well, just the one. I got to tell you, it's. I made a conscious decision to be a short story writer recently. I've been writing all my life. I have written some novels. I'd have to pull them out. Maybe one of them is good, but consciously I've made the decision to be a short story writer for a number of reasons. I love the form. The biggest reason, perhaps, is that I have two kids, and one of them is profound special needs. He's a nonverbal, high needs, autistic boy. Love of my life. So's his brother. So's my wife. I love my little family. But having that kind of being a caretaker to that child, as you can well imagine, you are a time management expert. It takes a lot of time and attention. So being able to concentrate on short stories rather than the long labor of love that is a book length manuscript is a
Mhm.
gift to me. So for better or for worse, for that reason and others, short stories is what I'm concentrating on. I'm coming out of an infertile period. I was writing all my life. I had some stuff published in some niche magazines and some online magazines. Things got really busy for me. Busy's not even the right word. This is a long-winded answer to your question, by the way. I hope you don't mind, Dan.
That was
um,
fun.
Thank you. Busy is not the right word. I'm a marketing professional, and I spent most of my career, as you mentioned, in PR and ad agencies. And I, for years, was trying to get out of agencies and get to a corporate marketing role. And I'm in a corporate marketing role now, and I love the work. And that work is much more conducive to my my art, my writing. But when I was still at agencies, not only was it a lot of time, but it was a lot of my, taking up a lot of my intellectual capital and worry. I wasn't writing as much, as well. I had the special needs child. I had this um, turbulent career in advertising. I don't mind telling you, if you want to read a short story of mine, I just had a piece published in a really great magazine called online magazine, crime
Yep.
magazine called All Due Respect. Uh, it's at all-do-respect.blogspot.com. Great magazine. But the story is 2,000 words, a little bit on the shorter side, takes place in advertising, and it allows me to do to jab this industry that raised me so well and make a few of my criticisms of advertising. Point I'm making is that um, advertising is a wonderful place to work, but it's also a place where layoffs are quite common, where there's a lot of strife. And the older you get in advertising, the harder it is to recover from those layoffs. So I had been
Oh yeah.
trying to get out of agencies and over to a corporate marketing role for some time. Finally landed that in 2021. Love my employer. Love what I'm doing, and it's been much more conducive to my writing. So that's a long-winded way of saying that all of those factors have led me to concentrate solely on short stories. And with that has come part of being a short story writer is evaluating the landscape of short story markets. And it's, I think, a really rich time. There are a lot of great genre and literary magazines. The online world, or the self-publishing, print as you go world, makes that easier to facilitate for publishers and editors, and they're able to put out more work. And there's a lot of great opportunities out there. Mystery Tribune, I think there's other writers that have certainly written for them more than me. I think when I got in there, they've got a print publication and an online publication,
Yep.
both wonderful. Um, they offered me, they didn't accept my piece for the print publication, but they asked me if I'd be comfortable having it in the online publication. And I said, hell yeah. And that was my experience. And since then I've learned, I've submitted some other things to them, like a lot of things that are good, like other long established crime magazines or magazines that are coveted and get a lot of submissions and are running it with the same short staff. They take a lot longer these days to get back to writers. They've got a really long queue, and that's just part of it, I think, right?
Yeah.
So that's what that experience was like. But boy, I got to tell you, I mean, part of being a short story writer is reading a lot of short stories, reading a lot of pubs, putting them all in an Excel spreadsheet, and there's some other great ones out there. Good
Mhm.
stuff. Pubs making dad lit, making like old school. I don't want to say the pulps are back because that's not. But there's a lot of they definitely utilize some of the same methods as the pulps to crank out good work across a number
Yeah.
of genres.
What are some short story mags that say you got your father-in-law liked to read, Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler and all the classic crime
Yeah,
novels. Give me the top three websites that you could direct them to where they could get access like that to short stories that would appeal to them and that they'd like and that they'd want to read.
that type of stuff. Oh,
Yep.
that's a great question. Uh only three, huh? Let me rattle off the
I
ones.
mean, you could give some more, but if I
Okay,
was gonna,
11. No, here's some of the ones off the top of my head, and I'm not going to do it justice. I could pull out my spreadsheet, but let me see if I can do that without a net. Uh, that Black Cat Weekly is a terrific magazine. They're doing neat things in that they are publishing. Black Cat Weekly it's electronic based. Um, they cover not just crime but other genre,
Mhm.
including fantasy, sci-fi, westerns, etc. They accept new work, but they also republish older work that they either have permission for or that it's in the public domain. So
Yeah.
when you get an issue of Black Cat Weekly, you get new stories. I was really thrilled to have a story in one of those issues, but you'll also get some republished piece from the golden era of pulp, or the post-war era of pulp.
Hmm.
magazines. So that's Black Cat Weekly. I definitely want to throw that one out there. Um, there's a really great mag called Starlight Pulp that is dedicated to kind of doing it old school, but with a new school twist. They've got I really like their stuff. I have never placed there. I've submitted there twice. We'll see what happens. But they're I love the stuff there. They've got uh, some great work. They either the work that I've read from Starlight Pulp seems to either resemble that old school pulp vibe or that old school pulp vibe with a new twist. And so yeah, if a 75 or 80 year old man that wanted more of the stuff that he used to read in the 50s and 60s asked me for a recommendation, Starlight Pulp would be on the short list. There's a couple other ones out there. Gosh, Pulp Modern is great. Dark Yonder is wonderful, except Dark Yonder's mode, or Dark Yonder's kind of stated mission is not your father's pulp. So it's right, and that's pretty cool, right? They want to go in new directions. Gosh, but it's great work there, and I'd have a hard time not I'd have a hard time not recommending Dark Yonder to somebody in that scenario because I'd be like, look, it's going to be like the old school Hitchcock stuff, but 21st century and new and literary and exploratory and good stuff in that direction. And there's more popping up, man. It's just great. It's a great time um to be a short story writer because there's so many more opportunities and new ones popping up all the time.
So when you start out and you're conceiving a short story, what does your process look like?
That's a great question. Your previous guest, Thomas Trung, and we've become pretty good online buddies. I can't wait to meet him in person someday. Um, but we've talked about this, and he really helped me articulate my thoughts on this. I think my short stories come from two places. One is a mood or a moment that I want to evoke, and this is Thomas's idea. Thomas is like, I want a gunfight by trench coated figures in a rainy Chinatown street. That's where he starts. And so,
Yep.
like, I get that. I want a mood. I want whatever it is, Doom, Doom, No Way Out, a lit cigarette, a shadowy corridor, whatever it is. So there's the mood piece, but then the other piece is I'm always gathering plots. There's that. We should talk about this, Dan. Are you a plotter or a pantser? This is a big one in our community, right? I'm a plotter.
Yes. You're a
Um,
plotter?
yeah, yeah, and I've gotten a lot more disciplined about plotting since then. Um, which doesn't mean there's not room for pantsing. Sometimes the characters will surprise you, but I'm a plotter, but I'm always gathering plots, right? And the plots I'm always gathering are stuff they come from stuff like I've written a couple stories where I've thought, well, who still uses cash? If you were going to rip somebody
Yeah.
off, how would you make sure you're ripping off somebody that has cash, right?
Yep.
Um, so I wrote a story about a bookie that really doesn't like to use Venmo. He keeps cash in his trunk, in the trunk of his car, and that one's coming out in an anthology, right? But or gosh, what was the other one? Oh, I had this delivery job driving for a chain of hardware stores, and I didn't do that. I didn't do this. You should see my Google history. I think all crime writers have a really sordid Google search history.
I'll say.
Um, but one of them was if I were a if I had that job where I used to do deliveries, how would I rip that place off? Like that's right. What would I steal? Where would I fence it? How does fencing stolen goods actually work? Et cetera, et cetera. But be somewhere between, so that long-winded way of saying, between the mood and which is ephemeral, and the plot, which is concrete, those two things come together into a story.
Yeah. We'll get back to pantsing. I'll just bring up one of my favorite thoughts that I've had because you bring up how would you successfully rip off like an employer? To
Yeah,
my mind, I always think about how stupid it is to rob a convenience store for money, right? So,
How much you really going to get?
yeah, how much are you really going to get? Now, alternatively, if you robbed it for cartons of cigarettes, you could walk away with a cool like 600 bucks.
Damn it, Dan, that's perfect and perfect insight into how that works.
Yes.
Yeah, I could rip off this convenience store for $80 or $110 in
Yeah.
coins or whatever it is, or I could take all of these cigarettes, sell them on the black. Yeah, perfect answer.
Yeah,
Perfect
right.
answer.
You could do it in Philadelphia. You just sell Lucy's and make a
Yeah,
fortune. But the
yeah,
point is, people who rip off convenience stores, not that enterprising.
yeah, yeah. Right.
That's the least enterprising humans alive.
Yeah, yeah. There's that. Where was I reading? I was reading something the other day where there's an actual term for when a crime plot depends on the kind of stupidity or desperation of the characters. I forget the term, but that's a thing, right? Like
Ah,
like the character that does this is not very bright.
well, that's
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 why
the
they're doing
thing.
this.
I think within context, it you think about because I've got my dad was a criminal defense attorney,
Yeah,
and I've known a lot of
met
cops
these
through
people.
up, and I've met these people, and they are not very bright. And the way that they sort of, if you're committing a crime like that, or if you're deciding that you're gonna put like bobby pins inside of a an orange juice container and then try and sue the grocery store, your conception or understanding of the nature of crime and society and the legal system is not great. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if it I would actually find it very authentic to have
Yeah,
stupid criminals that do dumb things.
yeah, yeah. The inverse is fun too. If you've got a criminal mastermind, that's a fun character
Yeah,
to
criminal
write, but you've got a lot
masterminds.
more work cut out for you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know
Well,
what's great for this kind of thing? There's a couple of really good Facebook groups. There's one in particular called Cops and Writers, founded by a cop who's an author, and I'm blanking on his name, but they are
yep.
super helpful. There's some good books out there too, but that group is super helpful because you can come
Mhm.
to them and say, "Hey, my story is blah 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 blah.
Yep.
How would they, how would they sell cigarettes or whatever it is?"
Yes. I've and we'll come back now. Let's go back to the short story thing and the way that you conceive a short story. So I am not very short story oriented. I find when I sit down to write something, I'm going to produce a novel between 75,000 and 90,000 words.
Yeah.
It's usually a 7-act structure,
Mm,
less than a 3-act structure. It's much more in that direction of things. So when I see an anthology or someone seeking a short story, I always sit down. And the thing that I get wrapped up in is in the medium of the short story. I am very interested in the ending and the
mhm.
message of the story. So as the story, I always want to know the ending before I sit down to write it. And then I weave it to that point. And I'm not sure if that's a good way to do it because I end up doing a dance with the reader. So I'm assuming that the reader is kind of be in on the joke with me.
Yeah.
And that as they read through it, they're experiencing it like I'm experiencing it, which has some sort of irony about it or some sort of message about it, or
Yeah.
is meant to say something about the character's experience or the state of society or something like that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I find that when I present it to people, it doesn't come across. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, I should go in and fix that. Uh,
I love where this is headed. Wait, I'm going to write. You can't see it on the audio, but I'm writing things down. This is what I do. I write things down before I forget them,
yes.
probably because I'm losing my frickin' mind.
Yeah.
And
So, well, I'll just give you an example. I I submitted a story called which is was around a character who Alex and I have worked on together, and is the protagonist in my debut novel, who's a Chicago police chief, and it's called Dick Bornman and the Mystery of Too Much Overtime. And Dick Bornman, it opens up with him sitting at a computer and he's looking at the overtime by precinct for the detectives. And he's like, man, there's a lot of overtime with these guys. And so he ends up having a young detective come in and engages with this young detective. And then he realizes that the reason there's so much overtime is because all the young detectives aren't out there clearing cases. They're driving across town. Well, it's what I wanted to get at was this idea that the mystery in this case could be solved or could be about anything really. It could be about
Yeah,
anything. And maybe what I'll do is I'll record it and read it after this
I
and people
love what
can
you're
hear it.
saying. This is
And
clicking with me
the
big time.
underlying idea is that it has to have some sort of almost by impulse, my brain won't allow me to complete a short story
Yeah,
without some sort of irony involved in it.
yeah.
And
I love where this is headed. I think
yes,
you should explore this more because I think you have the right. First of all, it's awesome to be able to admit, doggone it, I want my 75,000 words and my seven
yes,
acts.
yeah,
Cool. Um, there's a lot of people that don't like to write short stories. I myself love short stories, and I don't know how these people write flash. People that write really good flash,
yeah,
1,000 words, holy crap, good. Every once in a while, I do something in flash that I like, but so I think you should explore this more because I think you've got the right approach. You hit on something that's sort of I'm glad you did because it was sort of the third leg of this stool, which is if there's the ephemeral emotional mood evocation and the actual physical plot. There's sort of the third leg is sort of what is this story really about? Or another way of thinking of it is what is the most interesting aspect of this story to me? You just said in the
yes,
Borman
yeah,
story, you said there's a lot of ways this plot could go that involve mysteries and crime solving. But the most interesting thing about it to me is Borman looking at his organization, being like, "Damn it, I got to do something about all this overtime and save the city some money, or it's
yes.
my ass." Right?
Yeah, because it's his job, right?
I,
He's a
I love that.
detective.
That's the angle. That's the
Yes.
hook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So fundamentally, when you get into when I sit down to write a short story, I get so locked into that, and I just can't help it. I can't help it.
hmm
And
yeah,
I feel like more so with the short stories than when I write the novels. When I write the novels, I'm usually I have a person in my head who I'm trying to please or to make laugh or to scare or to, titillate and
yeah.
make interest. But when I'm writing a short story, I always feel like to make it interesting, it needs to feel like I'm having a conversation with the reader so that
Yeah.
the reader is reading it right next to me and they can sort of feel me winking. And
Just as if you were telling it to them.
yeah,
Yeah.
just as if I was telling it to them or
The
recounting
the
it.
the master of this is my favorite short story writer, and I have a few favorites, but my favorite, I don't know if he would qualify as dad lit. Guy de Maupassant, the 18th century French writer Guy de Maupassant, was, I
Yep.
think, the master of this because he could do two things. One, he was very good at the O. Henry-ish twist, and de Maupassant, I believe, worked exclusively in short stories. I think he had a couple novellas and maybe one novel, but he was mostly a short story writer. But he could produce the O. Henry-ish twist, but more often he he would surface what was most interesting to him in the story. I'll give you two examples. He wrote a famous story called The Necklace. It was about a woman of modest means borrows a necklace from a wealthy woman accidentally for a night out, accidentally loses the necklace. and then spends the rest of her life driving her and her husband into destitute. Um, how did she do this? She bought a new necklace to replace it, and then she and her husband went broke giving this necklace back. Years later, she meets the rich woman and she said, "My life has been miserable because I got to tell you the truth. I lost that necklace and we went bankrupt returning your net, buying your, buying a new necklace for you." And the rich woman says, "You shouldn't have done that. That necklace was fake."
Yeah.
you know, so that's an example of an O. Henry-ish twist. This woman was, ruined her life to, the necklace was fake. That's right. But
Yes.
another example where it's to me is more exemplary of the de Maupassant story and what we're talking about is let's see, what was the name of this story? There was a story called Butterball. Butterball was about and they're all in French. I don't read French, so I have to read the English translations. But Butterball was about a group of French people traveling through a part of France that was occupied by Prussia during one of their wars. And in the group of travelers is, an intellectual, a rich person, a banker, a politician, da, 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 and a prostitute. And they get to this checkpoint, and the Prussian officer learns that there's a prostitute in the carriage, and he won't let them go on until the prostitute sleeps with him. And as the story goes on, all of the characters are like, "We're in a hurry. We want to move on. Just sleep with this guy." I mean, they're French, right? So this Prussian, this German is occupying their land, and they're like, "Just sleep with them so we can all move on." And so
Yeah.
finally, Butterball goes, "Fine, I'll do it." And she sleeps with him, and the carriage is able to move on. So that's not a big O. Henry-ish twist. But what's most interesting, and it's kind of funny, right? You laugh.
Yeah.
But what's
Yeah.
most interesting to de Maupassant is how the characters behave in that situation. To me, what de Maupassant is saying is in that situation, and you'd have to read it to get all of the nuances out of it. The character that behaves with the most honor is the shabbiest one, the prostitute.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a de Maupassant favorite. He's always interested in elevating shabby people above the aristocracy.
Well,
Um,
believe it or
you know what
not,
I mean?
I think that you could even look at it as allegory for uh, post War of 1870 France.
Yes, and I keep
And
forgetting we're in your field. You know this
yes, so
better than
so for
me.
example, the idea of the Paris Commune following the German capturing of Paris, when the only people who seemed to have any success or to stand up to the Germans were the French urban peasantry in
The working
Paris.
class, yeah.
Yes, during the siege, they all underwent the siege, and then, of course, the Germans win the Franco-Prussian War, and everyone then screws over the Paris Commune.
Yes, yeah,
The people from the countryside, all of the wealthy people come in, they invade the Paris Commune and dismantle it. When they were the ones who made the peace with the Germans.
yes,
So to me, I would read that as an allegory for that entire experience.
yeah. Social commentary.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I keep forgetting you're a historian. You're a history professional, and yeah, you get this way better than me. It's a great story, but it's a perfect example of what we're talking about. What's the aspect of the story? There's a plot.
Yes.
You know, A goes to B and meets C, and they do this, and then D, E, and F happens. The end. But there's also in the middle of all that, there's a mood, and there's also the what do I find the most interesting about it? Is it this character's perspective? Is it Borman? How Borman? To me, the angle is Borman wanting to eliminate overtime, etc.
Yes, and basically he's trying to solve a mystery, and
Yeah.
the mystery is why are all of his detectives going through so much
Uh-huh.
overtime,
Uh-huh.
and how you would do that as a chief, as the chief of police.
Yeah. You'll have to revisit the short story format. I know you write article length things, but
Yeah, yeah, I do
keep
write
swinging at it.
article things. The short story format, it I find it fun, but I can see how a lot of authors end up doing or having sort of similar plot developments or
Yeah,
similar emergence. I'm trying very hard to sort of with what I'm doing. I get very into a Western style mindset, and by that I mean the Western, not West Europe
yeah,
versus
that's exciting.
it's
Frontier, self-reliance. We got to get our guns and solve this ourselves.
well,
We're in
it's
hot
yeah, it's we
water.
got to solve this ourselves, and we're gonna have the shootout at the end. So
Yeah,
everything's heading towards that shootout and that
yeah.
final confrontation. And I'm trying very hard to break out of it and to change and to do something different. But at the same time, it is so sort of ingrained in uh, I think American consciousness that we do it that a lot of storytellers do it naturally. Do you think there's anything that from that perspective that you find has just become ingrained and is just in your storytelling and when you sit down to write it's just going to come out?
Hmm. Say a little bit more, like meaning I tend to probably go for the same types of resolutions.
Yeah, yeah, that sort of thing. You go for the same types of resolutions,
Yeah.
or your sticking point is you really focus on setting, or almost similar. I think of this always comes up when I think about it. Is Steinbeck sets the setting at the beginning of the chapter, describes the setting, and then
Uh,
lets everything play out.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think about that as sort of a writing style. And
Hmm.
I'm always interested if authors deal with the same problems that I do when
Me
I'm
too.
writing.
Me too. And I think that's a fundamental aspect of dadlet.
Yes.
Um, Dads want to read about things that are on their mind, right?
Yes.
Um, that's a good question. I think I've got, honestly, I mentioned that I wasn't writing as much, but the last 3 years I've been writing a lot. I think, it's a craft too. It's a if it's your art, it's your craft. It's something you're always trying to get better at.
Mm.
And I think stories I've written, I look at some stories that I wrote earlier and stories that I've written more recently and thought, oh, geez, this is better. I wish, better than the earlier stuff. I hope, and if I keep doing this, then the stuff I like now maybe won't be as good as the stuff I'm writing a year from now. But I think that's an area to challenge myself. Um, to challenge myself in. I tend to get kind of focused on what we were just describing, the aspect of the story that's most interesting to me,
Mm.
and disregard whether it's of interest to anybody else. you know, this story that I just mentioned in All Due Respect is about a murder at an advertising agency. And I hope it reads like it's 2,000 words, pretty quick little read. I hope it reads like a nice, succinct, stylish little murder mystery. But the part that might be a little distracting was me flipping the bird to the advertising industry. So you might read it and be like, okay, we get it. um, I'm a faith-based, and you might find this strange, but I'm a faith-based writer too.
Hmm.
So explicitly or implicitly, I'm always trying to tension my work with the aspects of the Christian faith. That's super important to me.
Yeah.
Um, and that's an area where I can get sort of distracted or possibly make the story weaker at because I'm trying to go out of my way to make a religious point. That's a thing that I do, and I
So
think
what do
it's
you mean by
fun.
that? What do you mean by that? Are you tackling traditional ideas about morality? Are you writing sort of parables? Is are the stories sort of adapted biblical stories? What do you mean when you say that you base a lot of your work in Christian writing,
Yeah, I
or in sort of the concept of Christianity and the influence of that?
yeah. What's we don't we haven't. I'm glad you brought this up because it's super important to me. But the I am always, whenever I find my way, there's no new plots, only new ways to tell them, new angles from which to view them. And I often find myself going down a predictable or not predictable, well-worn plot, a form in a crime story. There has been a robbery, or there will be a robbery, or whatever. This guy's on the run, whatever the plot is, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm always asking myself, how can I Jesusify this?
I mean, you
You
just
know?
crucify the guy.
Yeah.
It's
And so
just-
yeah, and sometimes and you know what? There's so many great examples. Did you ever see a movie called Angels with Dirty Faces with from the 1930s? It was with James Cagney and
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
who was it, Pat O'Brien or somebody.
Yeah,
That's
the
a great
movie
one.
that
James Cagney and his buddy grow up in the mean, these Irish kids on the mean streets. One becomes a gangster, one becomes a priest.
yeah,
And that's easy. You can have the gangster, doing horrible things, and his priest buddy going, that's
yeah,
not how
don't do
we do
horrible
things.
things.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a great ending. See Angels with Dirty Faces. There's a great ending.
So
Uh,
you must love the film Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood.
I haven't
Set
seen it. Is
it.
that a
Oh, you've never seen it?
no? Is this a faith thing?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, like everything Clint's been doing lately, very, very grounded in sort of ideas about Catholicism and
I love it.
a big dad movie and based in Detroit, where you
Yeah,
are.
yeah. That's the Get Off My Lawn one. How did I not see that? Actually, I know how I didn't see that. It's because for years all I watched was Thomas the Damn Tank Engine, and yeah, wasn't Thomas Trang just complaining about how much Peppa Pig he
Yeah,
had to
Peppa
watch?
Pig has
Yeah, that's
become.
what it is. Probably Gran Torino came out when my kids were little, and there's a gaping hole in my pop culture knowledge in my movies. That's why.
Oh yeah, you got to watch Gran Torino.
Gran Torino. Okay,
Uh,
I'll cue that sucker
if
up this
if
weekend.
if you like exploring, because Million Dollar Baby has a lot of that in it.
Yeah,
If you like exploring sort of uh, the sort of theological questions related to, in his case, it's Catholicism and the actions of a character who has to do something difficult and is conflicted. I think Million Dollar Baby and Gran Torino are two pretty terrific dad style movies
love
that
it.
touch upon those ideas.
Love it. Yeah, that's way up my alley. That's right
Yes.
up my alley.
So
So good call.
do you think, because I've got another guest, prospective guest coming on, um, J. Daniel Sawyer, who writes science fiction, but also wrote a terrific article on his Substack where he talked about the challenge of retaining meaning in art without the divine.
Wonderful topic.
And I just thought that that was it. And, it brings up all sorts of things like secular stagnation and all these sort of things. And
Yeah,
so I think it's interesting that you integrate that sort of element of Christianity and Christian ethics and tackle those with your characters. I find that while I'm Jewish, I don't usually put in Jewish themes as much as I put in Jewish experiences, American Jewish experiences into the
mm,
stuff that I write. But I always like to explore the consequences of violence and duty, which are not necessarily questions of religion, but are questions of the stress that human beings experience.
I love it. That's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, but would you say that because not everyone's writing from that perspective
right.
of Christian morality or Jewish morality or Islamic morality, what would you say? Do you find that it's still there in the stuff you read, And do you think that without that component, you would find your writing meaningful?
Hmm. Hmm. I think it's a well-traveled path because it
Hmm.
was one of the great questions of modernism in literature. What if there's no God after World War II? What if there's no God?
Yeah.
Um, and there were a lot of, and this was what gave birth to existentialism, and existentialism influenced so much across the arts.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we've had a great answer from the detective or from the crime genre. The great answer to, if there's no God, then I can either take my meaning from the state, and I am at war with the state because I'm a cop or a criminal or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
or I can take my meaning from my individual code of honor. And I think that was Dashiell Hammett's great response to that. I think Hammett would say, "Look, he's got that great line on the Maltese Falcon. Somebody kills your partner, you have to do something about it. Doesn't matter if you liked him."
Yes.
That's a
So,
commandment right there.
so sort of a,
That's a divine edict, except that divine Sam Spade's God is Sam Spade himself,
yeah.
right? He's following his commandments and um his mandate, but it doesn't come from a higher power. That comes from him being the lone gun carving out his path. And Marlowe does that too, and crooks do it too, right? The crime writers that have written around crooks, they do that too.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's well traveled. That's a well traveled path. I have had some success. What I meant earlier was I think sometimes I've had to go back and rewrite things because I made it too corny or too explicit or um, there was one story where my buddy went, "Well, that's a Deus ex machina, except Deus is a character in your story." So, you know, you could say, but another way I've had success, sometimes I'm able to explicitly utilize the absence of God or the absence of faith. In a crime story, this is about crooks. This is something you can do. That the Dark Yonder piece that I had, um, that I was really happy with. It was the Christmas themed issue, and we all submitted Christmas stories. And Dark Yonder published mine. It's called the story's called "Merry Christmas, You Son of a Bitch." And in approaching a Christmas story, a Christmas crime story, one of the things I wanted to write about was um, how false Christmas can feel, especially if you take all of the faith out of it, and how commercial, how for many people, the dark side of Christmas is that it's just an excuse to be miserable. Um,
Mhm.
but that's an example of portraying characters that are explicitly not only do they not have faith, but they're opposed to faith. And when
Yeah.
they encounter areas of their lives that faith might help, that might be informed by faith, uh, they do the opposite. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think about it as sort of, if you're not doing that, you're doing the pressure of the holiday, right? You experience the holiday as an issue of expectation and trying to meet expectation, whether they're the one that you place on yourself or the ones others are thrusting upon you.
Yeah,
And I think Christmas is obviously has all sorts of angles to come at it.
yeah.
Uh,
It was a great issue, that Dark Yonder Christmas issue. I love my piece in it. Like, it's one of those times when you write
yeah.
something, you're like, I love what I did. Did I do this?
Hmm.
But all the pieces were good. And I'm like, wow, I'm really glad to be in this issue with all these other great stories.
Well, that's awesome. Well, check it out. What do you know what year it was?
Yeah, Christmas 2024, issue 8
Christmas 2024, Dark
of Dark
Yonder,
Yonder.
issue
Yes,
8. Perfect for the season.
yes. uh, what? How we doing on time there, Chief Dan.
I think we're getting close. We're getting close.
I
What
wasn't watching
do
the
you have
comments.
any do
It
you have any
flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, I know, right? We'll end up talking for like a half an hour after I
Yeah.
turn this off too. That happens every time.
Yeah.
The so any last plugs that you'd like to put out there, or any place you'd like to direct people to learn more about Charlie Kondek and Charlie
Yeah.
Kondeck's work, and anywhere that you're going to be making an appearance coming up?
Yeah, gosh. The yeah, I'll give you a couple of plugs so you can I don't have a book, so I'm never in that position to say, here's my book. But a couple places to keep an eye on where you might see my work. By all means, please go check out that All Due Respect crime magazine. They're doing great things. And the people behind that are doing terrific things. They're breaking a lot of boundaries. I think my piece is safe compared to some of the really great avant-garde work that they're doing at that pub. Please check it out. You'll see me in Yellow Mama down the road. Let me plug Yellow Mama. Yellow Mama is I didn't list this at the beginning when you were asking me about like current great pulp magazines, but that is a great labor of love, consistent online crime magazine. It's the work of a woman named Cindy Rasmus, who's been in the writing and publishing game for a long time. And it's just she's a good writer, and Yellow Mama is just, it, it's just consistently good, and it's always, it's not Mystery Tribune, right? Like glossy and really, got this great big model. It's more just a beloved source of great fiction by a lot of writers. I'll show up there, and as well as being all the things that I said I am. I think at least I try to be very much a Midwest writer, especially a Michigan writer. I really love being a Midwesterner, and I'm really and I love Midwestern literature and the art. One that I love a lot is called Great Lakes Review. I got a story in Great Lakes Review that was accepted and that will be out this summer. And keep your eye on that. You can see all of these things follow me on social. I'm at charliekondekwrites.com. Missed an opportunity there, Dan, because I could have called the website Kondeck's Content. That would have been good. But I
I'm
chickened
trying to
out. I should
convince
have called it Kondeck's Content.
I'm trying to convince Craig Turleson to change everything to Turley's Takes.
Yeah, his brand might be too far. That horse might have left the barn. But yeah, go to charliekondeckwrites.com. Follow me in the socials. I'll follow you back. I'd love to see you. And let's keep doing this online literary community of writers and readers and appreciators and silliness, and let's keep this thing going. I
Yeah,
love the
keep
dad
this.
lit. Just I love that you've articulated that you're asking people to can contribute it. I love that you're keeping the definition broad, and that it is a thing.
Well, we did get to talk about marketing, but I'll have to have you back,
Oh,
and
that's
and
right. We
we'll
didn't
we'll
talk about my
talk
day
about it.
job.
We'll talk
Yeah.
about it. But I'll just leave it with this. I think that genre has become defined more by reader expectation and not by creative choices. So, um, I feel like the readers have made genre an author problem rather than a helpful thing.
Mm.
And so when I think of dad lit and I think of marketing dad lit, I think the beauty of it is going to be that the audience is only going to expect to like it if you're writing to dads. You're writing to dads, there's I'm writing to an audience of a demographic versus writing to a uh, a series of tropes,
Oh, I
and
like that. I
that
like
I
that.
think is going to free up creativity. but all I
Yeah.
got to do is convince 100,000 people to become Dadlet enthusiasts. But anyway,
You're the man for it, my friend.
I doing my
You're the
best.
you're the spokesman of our movement.
Yeah, the Dadlet movement. Well, thank you, Charlie, and this has been the Dadlet Pod.